Hey guys, this is Gaijin Hunter. Right now, the Xbox Series X is getting all the attention because it's the one that comes with all the bells and whistles, but I wanted to do a video just showcasing the performance of my favorite Capcom titles on the Xbox Series S. Now, some things to keep in mind here, the Elgato, which I'm using to record this footage, does not support HDR or tone mapping, so it actually looks a little bit more colorful and vibrant when you play it on your TV. Also, of course, YouTube encoding and sort of compression is going to mess with the video quality as well, but rest assured, these games are fantastic. This is Monster Hunter World. I did hear that Kushada Daora caused a lot of problems, particularly for the Xbox One S, this is the version that this machine is running because it does not unfortunately get all the graphical options of the Series X version. That's just kind of the downfall of some of the titles that were enhanced, but it's something you got to live with, but that's also why you're paying $200 less. One misconception I am seeing from people is that this machine, it's not that it can't or doesn't do 4K. It actually does do 4K. It's just up to the publisher. The problem is just with, especially with next generation games, most publishers are going to opt to have this at 1080p and 1440p instead of 4K, just obviously giving the graphical prowess of the machine compared to the Series X. So a lot of these games are in 1440p and upscaled to 4K with the auto HDR, which you're not seeing here with the audio HDR, but it looks absolutely fantastic. I am looking forward to see which backwards compatible titles might get an enhancement patch and which might not, but I do expect going forward for next generation games that we won't have any disparity between the two machines outside of resolution. Here's Dragon's Dogma, one of my favorite games of all time. I came to the game very late. If you saw some of my videos, you'll see how much I absolutely adore this game. This thing never ran in 60 frames per second on the Xbox One, so of course this version's not either because they capped it at 30. It is a very solid 30 though. It might look a little jaggedy coming off of footage that was higher than 30 FPS, but the way that our eyes work as humans is after you play a little bit of the game, your eyes will adjust and start filling in those blanks between the frames, and the gameplay will feel smooth and fine. It's just when you go from 60 FPS to 30, it's jarring. Like, it's sort of like reminds me of like when you play Tetris or a game like Super Hexagon where you're in a later level that's really fast and then you go back to a level early in the game and it feels like the game is on slow motion. It's just because your mind and your eyes have adjusted, and I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. Not all games are horrible if they're not at 60 FPS. Still, it would have been nice, but you know, we have to take what we have. Since I got some extra time, I will note that I did watch the Netflix adaptation of Dragon's Dogma, and I found it, I guess overall enjoyable. There were some nice little shout outs, like you see the main character do a specific ability that was from this game or something like that, but I will be honest, it is a little disappointing that it really didn't go into the lore of the game at all, and it was quite a dark story. Dragon's Dogma was already kind of a dark story, but there was some comical quirkiness to it, and that's kind of missing in the adaptation. Anyways, if you subscribe to Netflix, it doesn't hurt to check out some more content, so make sure to see that if you haven't and you really like Dragon's Dogma. Next up is Resident Evil 2 Remake. Now, I'm not a huge savvy player of Resident Evil. I think I did a video on this game where I never played the originals on PlayStation 2, but I really, really enjoyed Resident Evil 2 Remake. It's definitely one of my favorite survival horror games that I've played. And certainly, I actually enjoyed it more than Resident Evil 3. There's just something about the structure of this game, it's intuitive. Like, you've got the police station, you've got the different rooms that you go into, and you slowly unlock it and you go further. It almost feels like a Metrovania game to me in a way. That, and also the story wasn't like completely off the wall. It was still kind of contained, survival horror, let's get out, there's zombies coming after us, where I think the later entries in the series go a little bit more like wild with the whole like crazy experiments and science stuff. One final thing I do want to note is that for the Resident Evil games in particular, because they're darker, with the auto HDR on, it makes the game look a lot better. I really wish that the Elgato capture devices were able to do tone mapping, which is the process of taking what you see in HDR and recreating it in SDR, but unfortunately they do not support this. Okay, moving on to Resident Evil 3 Remake. This was a game also that I enjoyed, but not quite as much as Resident Evil 2. There's something about this one that felt more like an arcade game. I don't know if that makes sense, where It's kind of like just like stages and you're just playing through them. Everything felt very scripted. Obviously, the interactions with this monster here, I forgot his name, I feel horrible, felt very scripted, where I really enjoyed the more fluidness of the gameplay in Resident Evil 2 Remake. But again, I never played the original for this game either, so I can't tell you how faithful it is, if it captures the same feeling of that game or what's so not, because I simply just do not know. Looking at this game after not having played it since it came out, I gotta admit that the graphics do look really good. I thought they were identical to Resident Evil 2, but now looking at it side by side, I almost want to say this game looks a little bit better. But the RE engine just performs so well. These games are not that heavy for install, and they just look fantastic, and they run at very good frame rates, even on the previous generation. So I'm super excited that the engine is going to be used for Monster Hunter Rise. That just tells me that this engine is going to be their true next-gen thing. So I'm very excited to see how it'll perform on the Switch, but everything that we've seen so far looks absolutely mind-blowing. I apologize for my bad aiming. I don't know what was wrong with my settings. Every time I hit the analog stick, it like jumped like half a foot over, and I just couldn't get off any good aims. If really bad shoddy gameplay is going to distract you, then this next clip is going to really upset you, because this is me just kind of button mashing in Devil May Cry 5. This is the new special edition that they just came out. If you play this on the Series X, it does have ray tracing, but for the Series S, unfortunately, they opted not to have that. The game still performs every time he kicks the car, it gets me. The game performs really well, which is what really matters in games like this, right? I have not played this game since it came out, the original first release of Devil May Cry 5, so I'm totally out of my norm here. I don't remember what the button inputs are for anything, so my gameplay is really bad. So I apologize, but the game runs really fantastic. I enjoyed this one. I'm not generally into character action games, stuff like Bayonetta, or even the older Devil May Cries, which I touched a little bit here and there. Ninja Gaiden, like, I can appreciate the quality and I like watching it. It's a visual experience, but I've never really gotten into the games. This is the first one I actually did, and I played it to the end. And I think it's because of the 3-character structure. And this one, I believe you can play as a 4th one as well. Being able to swap between completely different characters, depending on the scenario, I thought was completely fresh. I wasn't locked into just one guy. And the gameplay differences between the 3 were so big that I just loved it. And it truly does embrace a very arcade game style. Thinking back and remembering my time with this game, I loved the soundtrack. I thought it was great, and the writing and the acting is so over the top. It's like a really good popcorn flick on TV. I also love the fact that they include that option to see the cutscenes done by the motion capture artists and not the actual in-game. That is awesome. I really wish Monster Hunter did that, because we got that one clip of the motion actors doing the Rajang versus Kirin, and it was fantastic. Can you imagine being able to play the whole game, but instead of cutscenes, you get to have the mocap? That would be sweet. One completely random thing here, but the SSD speed also means that you don't have to worry about being capped on your write speed. So if you have internet like I do, which is insane, then you're going to be able to download games and write them to the SSD really fast. Okay, and to end off the showcase, I do want to talk about Witcher 3. I just want to show it really quick, just to show you that if a game got a specific enhancement for the Xbox One X, the Series X is emulating the One X, and the Series S is emulating the One S. So unless the publisher goes and does like a new enhancement patch, which I think they announced there is going to be an enhancements patch for both the S and the X next year for Witcher 3, then they're going to be running the default versions. And the default version for Witcher 3 on the Xbox One S did not have 60 frames per second as an option mode. So when you played on the Series S, even though it's more than capable of smashing this game at 60 frames per second, you're going to be running it at 30. So it's something to keep in mind if you're primarily buying these devices as like a backwards compatible machine. If there's a bunch of games that you really want to play that were enhanced for One X, you know that might be something to consider. For comparison, here is the game running in 60 frames per second on the Series X. Again, I think this game in particular is going to get a patch next year that's going to make them both look fantastic. So I'm excited to see that. Finally, I think it is worth mentioning that none of these games made the Xbox Series S like the fans. It was silent. It was quiet and smooth the entire time. Barely broke a sweat. Anyways, I hope this video was interesting for you guys and just seeing some of these games running, because there's not a lot of footage on Xbox Series S right now. I think everyone's really focused on the flagship Series X, but it is worth keeping in mind that the S is a fantastically powerful machine, and we'll see in the future whether or not it does run every game optimally just the same as the X, just at a different resolution, but all signs right now point that that is absolutely going to be the case. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time, happy hunting.